Imagine capturing a perfect photo of a polar bear, only to become its next meal, or a father fighting off a grizzly bear to protect his daughter. What would you do? In these stories, everyday people find themselves face to face with bears in battles they never saw coming. From a massive wildlife photographer outsmarting a hungry polar bear, to friends in Alaska running for their lives, from a stalking brown bear, and even a writer alone in Siberia fending off a fierce predator, these tales show just how wild and deadly nature can be. So join us in this video as we share 6 jaw-dropping stories of survival, bravery, and shocking encounters with bears. On the cold morning of September 21st, 2024, Lars Eklund set out for an isolated Arctic expedition in Svalbard, Norway. At 54 years old, Lars was a seasoned wildlife photographer who had spent over 30 years capturing the most elusive animals on camera. He was well known for his work in extreme conditions, having photographed tigers in Siberia, wolves in Alaska, and seals in Antarctica. Weighing 450 pounds and towering over most, Lars had always felt that his size and experience provided a level of safety in the wild. This trip to Norway's frozen wilderness was one of his most ambitious projects yet, to capture intimate shots of polar bears in their natural habitat. As climate change reduced sea ice and food sources, Lars knew polar bears were moving closer to human settlements, driven by hunger. He hoped to document this urgent story, showing the harsh realities faced by both predator and prey in the Arctic. Lars ventured deep into the frozen landscape, equipped with heavy camera gear, warm clothing, and survival supplies. The snow stretched endlessly, with the icy wind cutting through the silence. He set up his camera near a known polar bear path, hoping for a rare close encounter. As the hours passed, Lars spotted a large male bear in the distance. It was a powerful creature, moving slowly as it scanned the icy expanse for food. Lars prepared his camera, adjusting the lens to capture the moment. But the bear, driven by hunger, noticed Lars. It paused, its dark eyes fixed on the photographer. The animal, usually cautious around humans, seemed desperate. Lars sensed the danger but continued to hold his ground, believing his bulky gear and size would deter the bear. Instead, the bear began to approach, its steps growing faster as it closed the gap between them. Realizing the bear's intent, Lars tried to back away, moving carefully across the snow. His large frame made quick movements difficult, and the bulky camera gear slowed him further. The bear, now in full charge, reached Lars within moments. It lunged forward, its massive paws striking with incredible force. Lars fell back into the snow, his body jolted by the impact. Desperate, Lars swung his tripod in an attempt to fend off the animal, but the bear's strength was overwhelming. It swiped again, tearing through Lars's outer clothing. He struggled to regain his footing, knowing that any hesitation could be fatal. The bear, undeterred by Lars's defensive efforts, continued its attack, driven by primal hunger. Lars managed to grab his bear spray, discharging it directly at the predator. The spray created a cloud, momentarily disorienting the bear. Seizing the brief window, Lars scrambled away, his heavy boots crunching through the snow. He knew he couldn't outrun the bear, but he hoped to put enough distance between them to reach a small rocky outcrop nearby. The bear, now more agitated, shook off the effects of the spray and resumed its pursuit. Lars reached the rocks, using them as a barrier while trying to catch his breath. The predator circled the area, its low growls echoing in the icy air. Lars felt both exhaustion and fear as he faced the relentless predator, knowing that the battle for survival was far from over. Lars pressed his back against the cold rock, his breath visible in the freezing air. The polar bear circled slowly, its hunger making it determined to reach him. Lars knew he had only a slim chance of survival, as the remote location meant that help would not arrive quickly. He searched for anything that could help him fend off the predator, but his options were limited. His bulky gear was scattered, and the bear spray had already been used. The bear suddenly lunged forward, trying to climb over the rocks. Lars swung his camera bag in desperation, hoping to create a distraction. The bear swiped at it, ripping it apart with ease. Lars used the moment to climb higher onto the rocks, making himself less accessible. He knew it would only slow the bear temporarily, but any extra time could mean the difference between life and death. The bear paused, seemingly calculating its next move. Lars's body ached from the struggle, and the cold was beginning to seep through his layers of clothing. His leg throbbed from where he had twisted it during the earlier attack, making every movement painful. The bear, still driven by hunger, let out a low growl and tried to force its way around the barrier. Lars reached for a large rock, his hands shaking from the cold and fear. He hurled it at the bear, striking its snout. The bear retreated a few steps, surprised by the impact. Lars knew he could not maintain this standoff forever. His strength was fading, and the Arctic cold was becoming unbearable. He tried to think of a plan but found it hard to concentrate under the pressure. The bear, however, was relentless, resuming its efforts to climb over the rocks. Lars knew that if the bear succeeded, it would be nearly impossible to escape. Hours passed, each minute feeling like an eternity. The sky grew darker as the Arctic night began to set in. Lars's energy was nearly gone, his body shaking uncontrollably from exhaustion and cold. Just when it seemed that the bear was about to break through his defense, a distant noise cut through the silence. It was the sound of a snowmobile, a welcome sign that help was approaching. The bear, distracted by the noise, stopped its advance. It looked around, sensing the approach of humans. Lars, too weak to do much more, remained still, hoping the rescuers would arrive before the bear made another attempt. As the snowmobile drew closer, the bear finally retreated. Unwilling to face multiple humans, it disappeared into the icy expanse, leaving Lars alone and barely conscious. Rescuers reached Lars moments later, finding him weak but alive. They quickly wrapped him in thermal blankets and provided emergency care. Lars's injuries were severe, but he had managed to survive hours of relentless pursuit by one of nature's most formidable predators. He was airlifted to a hospital in Longyearbyen, where doctors treated his wounds and monitored him for hypothermia. As Lars recovered, he reflected on the terrifying encounter. The Arctic, which had been both his passion and his workplace for years, had nearly claimed his life. Yet he felt a sense of awe for the bear, understanding that it was driven by survival in a rapidly changing environment. Lars continued his work as a photographer, now with a deeper awareness of the fine line between admiration and danger in the wild. The story of his survival spread quickly, becoming a tale of both courage and caution. Lars knew that the encounter had changed him, leaving scars, both physical and mental. Yet, he remained dedicated to capturing the beauty of nature, even with the knowledge of its unpredictable and untamed power. The Arctic, still harsh and breathtaking, had once again shown its true nature, reminding everyone of the primal struggle that exists in the frozen wilderness. On the morning of August 10, 2024, David Brooks and his 16-year-old daughter Emily set out for a backpacking trip through Yellowstone National Park. It was their first adventure since the recent passing of David's wife, and he hoped this trip would help them reconnect. Both David and Emily were experienced hikers, having spent many summers exploring trails across the U.S. This trip, however, carried more than just the weight of their backpacks. It held the promise of healing and bonding in the vast wilderness of Yellowstone. The weather was clear as they followed a trail near Lamar Valley, known for its breathtaking views and abundant wildlife. The dense forests and wide meadows provided the perfect setting for their journey. David and Emily moved steadily along the path, enjoying the sounds of nature around them. They carried basic supplies: water, food, bear spray, and a small first aid kit, expecting a peaceful hike without any major challenges. Unbeknownst to them, a large grizzly had been seen in the area recently, moving closer to the trails due to food scarcity. As they walked deeper into the woods, the air grew tense with distant rustling breaking the silence. Suddenly, they heard a loud snap behind them. David turned just in time to see a massive grizzly emerging from the bushes, its eyes locked onto them. The bear, feeling threatened by the unexpected intrusion, reared up and let out a deep roar, a clear warning to leave its territory. David's instincts kicked in immediately. He motioned for Emily to stay close, trying to remain calm despite the fear surging through him. The bear, however, wasn't backing down. It lowered itself and began to charge, covering the ground quickly. With no time to think, David pulled Emily toward a nearby ravine, hoping to use the steep drop as a barrier. The rough terrain made running difficult, but they managed to reach the edge, their backs against the rocky wall. The grizzly, now only a few feet away, stopped and sniffed the air, assessing the situation. David knew that running further would trigger the bear's predatory instincts, so he stood tall, arms raised to appear larger. Emily gripped his hand tightly, her breath shaky as she tried to stay silent. The bear let out another low growl, its massive form blocking their path to safety. David slowly reached for the bear spray, knowing it was their only chance to create distance. He kept his eyes on the animal, waiting for the right moment. The bear, still agitated, took a few steps closer, sniffing aggressively. David sprayed a cloud of the deterrent toward the bear, creating a barrier of scent that made the animal hesitate. With the bear momentarily disoriented, David used the brief window to position Emily behind him, hoping to shield her from further danger. The ravine limited their escape options, and the bear still showed no signs of leaving. The next moments would determine whether they survived the encounter. David kept the bear spray ready, knowing they were not yet safe. The grizzly, still agitated, paced back and forth, its eyes fixed on them. Each heavy step sent small rocks tumbling down the ravine, adding to the tension. David's heart pounded, but he stayed focused, trying to think of a way to keep Emily safe. He knew they needed to outlast the bear's aggression, hoping it would eventually lose interest. The bear paused, lowering its head and sniffing the air again. It seemed unsure, bothered by the lingering scent of the spray. David took a cautious step back, keeping Emily shielded behind him. The bear advanced slightly, but its movements were slower now, almost hesitant. David hoped this was a sign that the spray was working, creating enough discomfort to make the bear retreat. Suddenly, the bear let out a deep growl, still unwilling to back down completely. David remained still, aware that any sudden movement could provoke another charge. He kept his arms raised, maintaining eye contact while trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. The bear finally turned its head, looking toward the dense trees behind it. For a brief moment, it seemed distracted, as if considering returning to the woods, seeing this as a chance to create more distance. David slowly guided Emily along the edge of the ravine. He moved carefully, keeping an eye on the bear's position. The grizzly, sensing the movement, growled again but did not advance. It stood its ground, watching them from a few yards away. David and Emily continued to inch along the rocky wall, their backs pressed against the cold stone. Minutes felt like hours as they made their way along the narrow ledge. The bear finally began to lose interest, its body language shifting from aggression to fatigue. It sniffed the air one last time before turning back toward the forest, its massive form disappearing into the trees. David and Emily remained still, waiting until they were certain the bear was gone. Once the danger had passed, David felt a wave of relief wash over him. Emily, still shaken, clung to his arm as they slowly made their way down the ravine. They were exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but grateful to have survived. David knew that they needed to find a safer spot to rest and call for help. He quickly checked the supplies, making sure they still had enough water, and the phone needed to contact park rangers. David used the satellite phone to alert the rangers about the encounter, providing their location for rescue. He kept Emily close as they waited, knowing they were not entirely out of danger in the remote wilderness. Despite the fear, David felt a deep sense of gratitude for having protected his daughter. The encounter had tested his strength and instincts, showing the depths of paternal love and the thin line between humans and nature. The rangers arrived later that afternoon, finding David and Emily huddled together near a safer clearing. They were treated for minor injuries and taken back to safety. The bear encounter left both with a newfound respect for the wild, understanding that survival required both courage and caution. For David and Emily, the trip had become a story not just of loss, but of resilience and unbreakable bonds. On October 14th, 2024, three lifelong friends, Tom, Mike, and Jack, set off for a week-long hike deep into the Alaskan wilderness near Denali National Park. In their mid-30s, the friends had grown up together, sharing a passion for the outdoors. They had planned this adventure for months, hoping to disconnect from the world and test their survival skills in one of the most remote and rugged landscapes on Earth. The dense forests, rocky terrain, and unpredictable weather made this trip both challenging and thrilling. The hike started smoothly, with the group covering miles each day. They carried heavy packs filled with camping gear, food, and essential supplies. Spirits were high as they navigated the trails, enjoying the crisp air and breathtaking views of snow-capped peaks. The friends set up camp each night, maintaining strict routines to store food safely and keep their camp clean to avoid attracting wildlife. However, by the third day, things began to change. Signs of a large animal appeared near the campsite, tracks larger than any they had seen before, along with disturbed bushes and broken branches. It was clear that a brown bear was in the area, likely pushed closer by the early signs of winter and a shrinking food supply. The friends remained cautious, but their confidence wavered as night fell. As they sat around the fire, the unsettling feeling of being watched grew stronger. Suddenly, they heard a rustling in the darkness, followed by a low growl. The bear was close, testing the edge of the camp. The friends tightened their grip on their bear spray, scanning the dark woods for movement. The bear did not charge that night, but made its presence known, inching closer to the tents as the hours passed. Over the next 2 days, the bear's behavior became bolder. It approached the camp each night, getting dangerously close to their perimeter. The friends struggled to sleep, aware that any noise could signal an imminent attack. On the 5th day, just before dawn, the bear finally struck. It charged through the campsite, its massive body crashing through the underbrush. In the chaos, Tom was knocked to the ground, his leg torn by the bear's claws. The others quickly used their bear spray, managing to drive the predator away. Tom's injuries were severe, with deep gashes on his leg that made walking nearly impossible. Mike and Jack acted quickly, using their limited medical supplies to stop the bleeding and bandage the wounds. With no immediate help available, they faced a daunting task: to carry Tom while staying ahead of the relentless bear. The attack had left them shaken, and now the already harsh terrain became even more treacherous as they tried to navigate with their injured friend. As the group moved slowly through the dense forest, the presence of the bear remained a constant threat. They could hear its distant growls, a reminder that it was not far behind. Exhausted and desperate, they struggled to keep moving, knowing that stopping could mean another attack. Mike and Jack moved slowly, carrying Tom between them as they tried to maintain a steady pace. Tom's condition was worsening, his face pale from pain and blood loss. The terrain was unforgiving, with steep slopes and fallen branches blocking their path. Each step was difficult, but the fear of the bear's return kept them going. They had little choice but to keep moving despite their exhaustion. The bear's distant growls were a constant reminder of the danger that lurked nearby. It seemed determined to follow them, its hunger pushing it to pursue the struggling group. Mike and Jack took turns carrying Tom on a makeshift stretcher made from branches and jackets, trying to conserve their energy as they navigated the dense forest. The cold wind added to their struggle, making every movement more painful. By midday, the friends reached a small clearing and decided to take a brief rest. They checked Tom's bandages, which were soaked with blood. The wounds needed better treatment, but they had limited supplies. Mike managed to clean the injuries with the little water they had left, while Jack kept watch for any sign of the bear. The group knew they could not stay long, as the bear would soon catch up. As they prepared to move again, the bear appeared at the edge of the clearing. Its eyes were fixed on the group, its body low and tense. The friends froze, knowing they had little defense left. Mike reached for his remaining bear spray, hoping it would be enough to deter the predator once more. He sprayed a cloud toward the bear, which hesitated but did not retreat entirely. The animal paced back and forth, growling deeply as if deciding whether to attack again. Taking advantage of the brief standoff, Jack and Mike lifted Tom and began moving toward a rocky hill in the distance. The rocky terrain could provide some protection, giving them a better chance to defend themselves if the bear followed. Their muscles ached from the effort, but they pushed on, desperate to reach safety. As they climbed the rocky slope, the bear stopped its approach, finally losing interest. The rough terrain seemed to deter the predator, which turned and slowly disappeared into the thick trees. The friends collapsed on the rocks, relieved but completely exhausted. Tom's injuries still needed urgent medical attention, but they had survived the immediate threat. Hours later, the group reached a safer area where they managed to call for help using a satellite phone. A rescue team arrived, airlifting Tom to a nearby hospital in Anchorage. Mike and Jack, though battered and bruised, were grateful to be alive. The bear attack had tested their strength, friendship, and will to survive. In the aftermath, Tom underwent surgery to repair his leg injuries, while Mike and Jack recovered from the physical and emotional ordeal. The wilderness, once a place of adventure, had become a reminder of nature's unpredictability. The friends' bond had been tested by fear and pain, but their shared struggle for survival had also strengthened it. On the morning of September 18th, 2024, four college friends, Ryan, Jess, Ben, and Lucy, set out for a weekend camping trip in the Appalachian Mountains near Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The group had been friends since their first year, and they were excited to spend time together away from the pressures of college life. Ryan, a biology major, loved the outdoors and often led hikes for the group. Jess, a nursing student, was the practical one, always ensuring they packed first aid supplies. Ben, a laid-back philosophy major, was more focused on enjoying the scenery, while Lucy, an environmental science major, hoped to see some wildlife. They planned to explore the park's marked trails, carrying only basic supplies like food, water, tents, and a small first aid kit. The day started well, with clear skies and cool weather as they trekked through the dense forest. The trail offered beautiful views of the rolling hills and vibrant fall foliage. However, as they hiked deeper into the woods, Ryan suggested taking a shortcut off the marked path to reach a scenic viewpoint faster. The others agreed, eager for a little adventure. The unmarked trail was narrow and overgrown, making it difficult to navigate. After an hour, the group found themselves in an unfamiliar part of the forest. Jess started to feel uneasy, reminding them about the growing black bear population in the area. Suddenly, they heard rustling in the nearby bushes. Before they could react, Mother Black Bear emerged with her 2 cubs. Sensing a threat, the bear let out a roar, causing the friends to freeze in place. Ryan raised his hands slowly, trying to appear non-threatening, but the bear, focused on protecting her cubs, charged forward. The group scattered in panic. Ben, who was closest to the bear, tripped over a fallen branch, injuring his ankle badly. He tried to get up, but the pain was too severe. Jess, seeing Ben struggle, ran back to help him while Ryan and Lucy grabbed their bear spray, hoping to drive the bear away. The bear continued its aggressive approach, swiping its massive paw in Ben's direction. Jess quickly dragged Ben away, and Ryan and Lucy sprayed the bear, creating a cloud of deterrent that forced it to retreat momentarily. They knew the bear could return at any moment, so they acted fast, using a nearby tree as cover while they checked Ben's injury. His ankle was swollen and bruised, making it clear that he couldn't walk without assistance. With limited supplies, poor cell service, and an injured friend, the group faced a serious challenge. They needed to move quickly, but the thick forest and rough terrain made every step difficult. Ben struggled to keep pace, relying on Ryan and Jess for support as they tried to find their way back to the main trail. The bear's growls echoed in the distance, a reminder of the danger that still surrounded them. Ryan and Jess helped Ben move as quickly as possible, with Lucy leading the way to find the marked trail. The forest was dense, making every step harder for Ben, whose ankle had swollen even more. He leaned heavily on Ryan, who did his best to support him while still keeping an eye on their surroundings. Jess kept her bear spray ready, knowing the bear could reappear at any moment. The group pushed forward, their movements slow but steady. Lucy scouted ahead, looking for any signs of the trail they had left hours before. Her heart raced, knowing they needed to find it soon. The dense underbrush made progress difficult, and the sounds of the forest added to their growing anxiety. Ben winced with every step, but he kept moving, determined not to slow the group down further. After what felt like hours, Lucy spotted a familiar marker in the distance. She called out to the others, relief clear in her voice. The group moved toward it, grateful to be back on a familiar path. However, the situation remained critical. Ben's injury was severe, and they were still far from safety. Jess paused to re-wrap Ben's ankle, using her limited medical supplies to stabilize it as best as she could. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the trail. The temperature dropped quickly, adding to the urgency of their situation. The group knew they needed to reach a safer area before darkness fully set in, as the risk of encountering wildlife increased at night. Despite the pain, Ben managed to keep moving, urged on by his friend's support. As darkness fell, the group finally reached a clearing where they could rest briefly. Using what little energy they had left, they made a small fire to keep warm. Jess kept watch, listening for any signs of the bear while Ryan and Lucy tried to make Ben more comfortable. Exhaustion was evident on all their faces, but they knew they could not let their guard down. With limited phone service, Lucy managed to get a weak signal and call for help. She gave their approximate location, hoping that rescue would arrive soon. The group huddled close, feeling both relief and fear as they waited in the cold night. The forest was silent now, but the tension remained, as they were not yet safe. Hours later, the distant sound of footsteps broke the silence. Park rangers arrived, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. They quickly assessed Ben's injury and provided additional care. The friends were exhausted, but grateful to see help had finally arrived. Ben was placed on a stretcher, and the group began the slow trek back to safety, with the rangers guiding them. Once back at the main trailhead, Ben was taken to a nearby hospital for further treatment. The others, though bruised and tired, were unharmed. The experience had tested their friendship and survival instincts, pushing them beyond their limits. As they left the forest, they understood that their bond had grown stronger, having faced danger together and come out alive. On October 25th, 2024, Eugene Holtzman, a famed author and adventurer, arrived in the remote wilderness of Siberia. At 52 years old, Eugene was known for his daring expeditions, often using them as inspiration for his novels. He had trekked through deserts, climbed mountains, and survived harsh climates before. This time, Eugene had decided to spend 6 months living off the grid in the unforgiving Siberian taiga, hoping to capture the essence of raw survival for his next book. Eugene set up a small cabin deep within the forest near Lake Baikal, equipped with only the most basic supplies. No modern technology, just a rifle, fire starter, and survival tools. He was confident in his skills, having spent years honing them in less extreme conditions. The initial weeks went smoothly, with Eugene trapping small game, fishing, and collecting firewood. The crisp, cold air and the silence of the forest inspired him, pushing him deeper into the experience of living alone in nature. However, as winter tightened its grip, the conditions grew harsher, the temperature plummeted, and food became scarce. Eugene found himself eating less, conserving energy as he ventured further from the cabin in search of supplies. The wilderness felt more hostile each day, but he remained determined, driven by both pride and the hope of a compelling story. One evening, Eugene returned to his cabin to find a terrifying scene. A massive Eurasian brown bear was prowling near his shelter, searching for food before hibernation. The bear had already broken into the cabin, tearing apart the supplies and scattering them across the snow. Eugene tried to scare the bear away by making loud noises, but the animal remained undeterred, driven by hunger. Eugene backed away slowly, aware that he could not match the bear's strength. He retreated to a nearby cluster of trees, climbing up to gain a temporary refuge. From his perch, he watched as the bear destroyed his shelter completely, reducing weeks of hard work to rubble in a matter of minutes. The loss of the cabin meant not only the loss of shelter, but also of food and firewood, leaving Eugene exposed to the brutal Siberian winter. The bear eventually moved on, but Eugene's situation was now dire. He climbed down from the tree, surveying the damage with a sinking feeling. He quickly gathered what little he could salvage, mostly scraps of fabric and some tools, knowing that he would have to act fast to survive the freezing night. His only option was to build a temporary shelter in the nearby forest, using fallen branches and whatever materials remained intact. As darkness fell, Eugene felt the full weight of his isolation. The cold seeped through his layers of clothing, and hunger gnawed at him. The looming threat of the bear's return kept him on edge, but he could not afford to rest. The wilderness had turned hostile, and Eugene was now in a desperate fight for survival against both the elements and the unrelenting predator. Eugene gathered branches and leaves, hastily constructing a makeshift shelter in the darkness. His hands were numb from the cold, making even simple tasks difficult. The Siberian night was brutally cold, with icy winds piercing his clothing. Eugene knew that without a proper fire, his chances of surviving until dawn were slim. He fumbled with his fire starter, finally managing to spark a small flame. The warmth was weak, but it offered a small reprieve from the freezing temperatures. Eugene's thoughts grew clouded by exhaustion and hunger. He had not eaten since early morning, and his body felt weak. Despite the small fire, the cold continued to drain his energy, and his eyes struggled to stay open. He wrapped himself in what little fabric he had salvaged from the ruined cabin, trying to trap as much heat as possible. The bear's attack had left him not only exposed, but also without vital supplies. Suddenly, Eugene heard rustling in the distance. His body tensed as he realized the bear might have returned. The sound grew louder, and Eugene quickly grabbed his rifle, ready to defend himself. His heart pounded, and his breath came in short, visible bursts in the cold air. The rustling stopped briefly, then resumed with more urgency. Eugene strained his eyes, searching the darkness for movement. The bear emerged from the shadows, its massive form barely visible in the dim firelight. The animal's hunger had driven it back, still searching for food. Eugene knew he could not outrun the bear, nor could he withstand another attack. He aimed the rifle, hoping to scare the predator away. He fired a warning shot into the air, the loud noise echoing through the silent forest. The bear paused, confused by the sound, but did not retreat. Eugene realized he had one final chance to drive the bear away. He gathered a burning branch from the fire and waved it toward the bear, hoping the flames would intimidate the predator. The bear hesitated, its instincts battling its hunger. After a tense standoff, the fire's heat finally seemed to deter it. The bear backed away slowly, its eyes still locked on Eugene. It disappeared into the darkness, leaving Eugene alone once more. With the immediate danger gone, Eugene collapsed to the ground, his body shaking from both fear and exhaustion. He knew he was not yet safe. The cold remained unforgiving, and his supplies were nearly gone. As dawn approached, Eugene's body ached, his mind foggy from lack of sleep and food. He knew he needed to find a way back to civilization, but his strength was fading rapidly. Several days later, Eugene was found by a group of local hunters. They had come across his makeshift shelter, surprised to find someone alive in such harsh conditions. Eugene was weak, dehydrated, and frostbitten, but he had survived. The experience had left him physically and mentally scarred, a stark reminder of nature's unforgiving power. Back home, Eugene reflected on the ordeal. The wilderness, once a source of inspiration, had shown its true, brutal nature. His survival had been a matter of luck and instinct, revealing both human fragility and the raw dominance of the wild. On October 12, 2024, a group of commercial fishermen set up camp near the salmon-rich Ozernaya River in Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula. The men, Sergei, Ivan, Pavel, and Mikhail, had traveled to this remote region for the annual salmon run, hoping to catch a profitable haul. The Kamchatka Peninsula, known for its rugged beauty and abundance of wildlife, was also infamous for its large brown bears. Despite the risks, the fishermen were eager to make the most of the season. The group, experienced in the harsh realities of commercial fishing, had spent years navigating Russia's wild rivers and forests. Sergei, the oldest at 45, was the leader known for his skill and discipline. Ivan, younger but equally seasoned, was responsible for setting up traps and checking nets. Pavel and Mikhail, both in their 30s, handled the heavy lifting and camp duties. The men built a temporary base near the river, setting up tents, cooking gear, and fish storage bins. Initially, the camp ran smoothly, with the fishermen catching large numbers of salmon each day. The river was teeming with fish, and the men worked tirelessly, filling their containers with fresh catches. However, as the days passed, the men grew careless, exhaustion set in, and they began leaving food and fish scraps unsecured, making it easier for animals to pick up the scent. By the fourth night, trouble arrived. The fishermen heard a heavy rustling near the edge of the camp, followed by the distinct growls of a brown bear. The massive predator, driven by hunger, had picked up the scent of fish and ventured into the camp. It found discarded salmon scraps near the tents, devouring them with ease. The men watched from a distance, their flashlights revealing the bear's massive size. Sergei urged caution, but the others were less concerned, believing the bear would leave once it found no more food. However, the bear returned the next night, encouraged by its success. It rummaged through the camp again, finding more scraps left by the careless fishermen. Pavel, annoyed by the intrusion, threw rocks at the bear in an attempt to scare it away. The bear retreated temporarily, but its aggressive behavior signaled that it was becoming accustomed to the camp and its easy meals. The next night, the bear launched a full attack. It charged into the camp, knocking over storage bins and tearing into tents. The men scrambled to defend themselves, grabbing whatever tools they could find. Sergei tried to use a flare to frighten the bear, but it only angered the animal further. In the chaos, Ivan was knocked down by the bear's powerful swipes. Before the others could react, the bear clamped its jaws around Ivan's leg, dragging him toward the dense forest. The fishermen shouted and waved their weapons, but the bear vanished into the darkness with Ivan. The remaining men were left stunned, realizing the gravity of the situation. Ivan's cries faded into the distance, leaving the camp eerily silent. Sergei, Pavel, and Mikhail stood in shock, realizing that Ivan had been dragged into the dark forest. The bear's attack had happened so quickly that they were still processing the terrifying scene. Panic surged through the group, but Sergei, as the leader, tried to focus. He knew they had no time to waste if they were going to save Ivan. The fishermen quickly gathered their remaining supplies, including a rifle, a flashlight, and some first aid gear. Sergei led the way, following the tracks left by the bear and the trail of blood from Ivan's injuries. The dense forest was silent except for the crunching of leaves underfoot, and the darkness made visibility difficult. Pavel held the flashlight, scanning the trees for any signs of movement. Mikhail clutched the rifle, his hands shaking from both fear and adrenaline. After about 20 minutes of tracking, they spotted a faint movement ahead. Ivan was lying on the ground, motionless, with the bear standing over him. The animal seemed distracted, its attention focused on Ivan's torn clothing. Sergei signaled the others to spread out, hoping to approach without alarming the bear. He raised the rifle, aiming carefully at the massive predator. Sergei fired a shot into the air, hoping to scare the bear away without harming it. The loud noise echoed through the forest, startling the bear. It paused, looking around with confusion. The fishermen held their breath, unsure of what the bear would do next. After a moment, the bear backed away from Ivan, seemingly frightened by the noise. It retreated into the woods, moving slowly, but keeping an eye on the men. The fishermen rushed to Ivan's side, finding him severely injured but still alive. His leg was badly mauled, and he was losing blood quickly. Mikhail used a tourniquet to slow the bleeding while Pavel checked Ivan's other wounds. They knew they needed to get him back to camp immediately if he was going to survive. The journey back was slow and painful, with the men carrying Ivan between them. The bear's presence was still a threat, but they moved as fast as they could through the uneven terrain. Ivan drifted in and out of consciousness, his breathing shallow. The fishermen encouraged each other, pushing through the exhaustion and fear to reach the camp. Once back at the campsite, they used the satellite phone to call for help. A rescue team was dispatched, but they were still hours away. The fishermen worked to keep Ivan stable, doing their best with limited medical supplies. They kept a watchful eye on the edge of the forest, knowing the bear could return at any moment. The rescue team arrived in the early morning, just as the sun began to rise over the Kamchatka Peninsula. Ivan was airlifted to the nearest hospital, where doctors treated his wounds. His recovery would be long, but he had survived the ordeal. The fishermen, though shaken by the events, were grateful that they had managed to save their friend. The attack had left a lasting impact on the men. It was a harsh reminder of the dangers of the wild and the consequences of underestimating nature's power. They vowed to be more cautious in the future, understanding that the wilderness was both beautiful and unforgiving. The experience had tested their courage and friendship, but it had also shown them the thin line between survival and tragedy in the remote wilderness of Kamchatka.